Hello, my sober lovelies. Before we dive in, I'm really excited to announce my group coaching program for women is live, and you can join now. So excited for this because let's be real here. Quitting drinking isn't just about saying no to the glass of wine or booze. It's about what comes after. All the fear, the boredom, the late night anxiety, and the stories you've been telling yourself for years. And that's where my Rewired Sober group coaching program for women comes in. It's only $247. I'm being totally transparent on the price. It's for 3 months, and you'll learn how to shift your mindset, build habits that actually stick, and question the core beliefs that have been keeping you stuck, and find healthier ways to deal with that loneliness and that now what feeling. The best part is you don't have to do it alone. We'll have live group coaching sessions weekly, and there'll be a bunch of women walking through it with you. It's not another cookie cutter sobriety program for mommy vloggers. It's neuroscience meets real life, and it's designed for women to help you not just stay sober, but actually feel good living sober. You can join anytime, and I'd love to see you on the inside. So start today, get instant access. The link's in the show notes. Welcome to Rewired Sober, the podcast where we unpack what it really takes to rewire your brain after alcohol. Hi, I'm your host, Kate Vitella, a registered nurse, board certified in mental health and addiction, sober since 2018, and a coach who blends neuroscience, lived experience, and real talk to help women break the shame spiral and rebuild their thinking with tools like journaling, humor, and honest conversation. This isn't surface level sobriety. This is where the healing gets deep, grounded, and unapologetically honest. So let's get into it. Welcome back, my beautifully messy friends. This episode, I'm going a little rogue, shocker, and I'm going to go off the cuff here because I have some breaking news. This podcast is now changing names from You've Been Selected to Rewired Sober. So I'm going to explain a little bit of the reasons why I decided to change the name, because there's a story here I think is important to get out there. And I think it relates to the sober journey in a way that needs to be told. So from here on out, the next few episodes, because they're pre-recorded, I'll probably, throw in an intro discussing the name change. And then moving forward, everything will just be switched over. As many of you have seen, no, not many of you. That's the cool part. I recently switched my Instagram, all my sobriety content, from my personal Instagram at Kate Vitella to Rewired Sober. And that was the starting point, a big starting point for me in how this whole process kind of came to fruition. And I want to explain where my headspace has been the last few weeks and what brought me here. So there's 2 reasons why I'm changing the name, 2 big reasons, and they're very different from each other. And so their caveat there is that I'm going to switch gears pretty radically. But I want to start with the first reason. And I think this is probably the most important because this is my truth and the most honest I can be with you. When I started my business a couple years ago, my coaching business, I really wanted everything to just be under my name, Kate Vitella Coaching, Kate Vitella Instagram. I didn't really want to start a sober Instagram, with all these different monikers. And it was important to me to name the podcast You've Been Selected, because if you've listened to any of the episodes, you know that that's sort of the punchline of my story of going through the monitoring program And looking down at that app and seeing the red letters and knowing that I had been selected for, a random UA because I'm in a monitoring program for nurses, but also the mindset shift where I decided at that time that I had been selected for a whole lot more than just surviving that program. And so, yeah, I wanted to name the podcast that. I mean, I even have it tattooed on my arm, and it will always be an important part of my story. And so that is mine forever, and it doesn't matter what the podcast is called, really. But what happened to me over the course of the last couple years that I've been developing this business is that I feel like I got lost in the sauce a little. And I got really caught up in the game, the vanity metrics of Instagram. I am going to be completely honest with you. I have done everything humanly possible to grow my Instagram following. And get ready to like throw up in your mouth a little bit here, folks, because this is really cringe, but I want to be totally honest. I've done everything. I have bought followers, bought bots. I have paid to have my posts boosted. I have paid for ads. I have I've lost myself in trying so desperate for an audience. And all that is really is vanity metrics. It's a number that shows, look how many followers she has. So when I show someone my personal Instagram, they can say, oh, wow. Oh, and the blue check mark by my name, by the way, which you can apply for and pay for. So I've always paid to play. And that's no secret. I mean, a lot of us entrepreneurs have. And what I've done is pretty common in the entrepreneurial space, but that doesn't give it really any validity because it's not really common for me. Like I try to be a really straight shooter. And I caught myself getting lost in all of it. And so much of my Instagram became about me. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me in this outfit, look at me in this, with some sober messaging, of course, because my whole life is based around sobriety. I mean, I can't separate my personal life and my sober life. There is no separation. That's why I am the human that I am today. So regardless of however I separate the Instagrams, people may always think of me as a quote sober influencer because that's my life and it will be always a part of me. But it became really apparent to me that that was the most important thing. Like again, cringe. And and was I really helping people by posting 8,000 photos of myself? Was I really helping people by making it all about me and my story? I mean, not really. There is some validity there. There's some merit into sharing my story. And I think it was important to get that out there. And here you go. There's 25 plus episodes all about the story, and you've been selected and other people's stories. And so I don't regret that because I certainly wouldn't want anyone to feel alone in when they're going through something awful like that. And I would love for people to always reframe and think of it as I've been selected too to rebuild my life, to restart, to restore, to recover. And think of this journey as an invitation and less as a sentence of now I'm, forced into a life of depravity and church basements and never getting invited. I always want that the positive spin to be the mindset. But going back to me, shocker, is that I'm confessing here. I'm like sweating while I'm saying this. I'm saying this to you, and I'm also speaking into the void. Like there's no one home. I'm just talking into my computer. I'm starting to sweat because I'm confessing that it became about me and who likes me and who approves of me. And I became this person that was preaching to the masses. I never wanted to get political. I never wanted to stand up for my opinion. I never wanted to, be too sharp in one area or the other, be too loud, too fierce, too polarizing. And what I did was attract the wrong audience. And I started getting messages almost as soon as I started coaching from men. And I love that men listen to this podcast because sobriety is for everyone. but I only coach women. And I feel like I started getting really nasty messages from men, like catcalling, wanting to comment on my appearance, wanting to connect, not about sobriety. Some people were actually calling me through Instagram and then harassing me that I didn't respond to their messages. I tried everything to change the narrative and make it very clear that I only coach women, 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 women. But yet, here I am getting all these messages. And part of it is my fault because when I started really getting proactive about building my Instagram account, I also started modeling. And in that world, for every casting I went to, they wanted to know what our social media accounts were and how many followers we had. We actually fill out on the application at some model casting calls. Like it'll say, how many followers do you have on TikTok? How many do you have on Instagram, Twitter, what have you? And so it became very clear to me that I had to build that up. And it was like this calling card of showing people that I had a blue check mark and I had a certain amount of followers, and therefore I could be invited to the next thing. And it actually helped me get on some podcasts because people thought I had a big following. I mean, isn't that sad? But that's the reality of the world we live in, right? So I got so caught up in that. And there's a big section of my personal Instagram that is puke modeling photos. Now, I love fashion, but I am not a model. And there was a time in my life where I thought that was going to be my introduction into the fashion world. It was also something I had to do to prove to myself. I wrote about this a lot in the Sober Curator on modeling and feminism and why I felt like my body was such a miracle that it was time that I be proud of it, especially overcoming so many disordered eating issues and alcohol related issues and all the havoc I wreaked on my body. But needless to say, the pictures weren't helping my coaching business. And I started to try to kind of erase that and just rebuild with sober content when I began my coaching business. And yes, I do have a lot of followers that are legit, right? I mean, it's not all fake. There's a portion of it that's fake, but there's a lot of people on there that I love and adore from the sober community, and I want to keep on there. So I'm going to keep my personal Instagram account alive and direct everything over to Rewired Sober. But, but it's very important that I created a safe space for my coaching content and for women to follow me and for this to be redirected into something that was serving the people that I help, that was being more educating and less about me. I think a lot of us get so caught up. We start on social media and we mean to provide a valuable message. But then somewhere you get so caught up in the metrics of it and it becomes so addictive to check your phone 8,000 times a day and see how many likes, how many views, how many followers. And, at one point, I actually bought followers because I was obsessed with getting to 5,000. Obsessed. I checked every day. And so somewhere around 3,900, I just said, screw it. I know how to alleviate this problem. I'll buy some followers and I'll bump myself well over the 5,000 mark and I'll never look at it again. Yeah, not helpful because what you end up with is just crap and bots and half of them fall off anyways. But I'm calling myself out here because I want to be honest about the journey that I've been on as an entrepreneur and as a woman in recovery who my life is built around honesty and humility and willingness to call myself out and stop the behavior, and cut it off and be honest about where I'm at and restart. And that's what I ask my clients to do, to be transparent, to be honest, to be humble. Let's laugh about it, right? So I hope that you are listening to this half laughing at my stupidity. Please don't look at the modeling photos. And also maybe empathizing with my desperation a little bit. I will say one more thing on this topic. When it came time to switching over to Rewired Sober, I talked to a male friend in the sober coaching space, and he said, it may be better to switch over to Rewired Sober because you're an attractive woman and that, might send off the wrong message. And he was being completely supportive. In no way was he trying to come down on me. But when he said that, it sparked something sort of defensive in me as a feminist. And that is that as a woman, I am allowed to be attractive and well dressed and smart. I am allowed to be both. I don't have to choose. And that was another reason why I stubbornly held on so long to my personal Instagram account as the path to my coaching and my podcast and all that, because I stubbornly was holding on to the notion that women are allowed to be attractive and stylish and have other interests and be smart as fuck and be well educated, well organized, well spoken, have a strong vernacular, know what we're talking about, have a seat at the table, right? We're allowed to be all of that. We don't have to come in dumpy frumpy just so that we are accepted. We don't have to dress down, wear no makeup, try to be unattractive. I mean, that is the anti-brand. That's my anti-branding. Like, you don't have to dummy yourself down. And if there are women out there judging me for loving fashion or, if for some reason my looks are off-putting, like, dude, that's on you. You know, let's book a coaching session and talk about it. But that's not on me. It's not my job to look as homely as possible so that you feel comfortable. And I wouldn't want any woman around me to do that. I wouldn't want my friends to do that. I would say, no, you show up and be the badass, attractive vixen that you are. And yeah, you're allowed to be smart as fuck and attractive and well dressed. So yeah, that's my caveat there. But I want to pivot to the other reason why the name change, and it has nothing to do with really Instagram or, vanity metrics or my fashion content. It has more to do with my messaging and my coaching. And I've been asked several times, like, what's your coaching method? What's your your 1, 2, 3 punch? What's your style? What's your secret to success? And as much as I would love to say, these are the steps, 1, 2, 3, katevitella.com. This is the way. I know the answers. I'd be lying to you. And I think any coach who tells you they have the magic solution, the one and only answer for you to get sober and stay sober, I think you should run. Run fast, because that is a person whose ego is so far in the weeds into what this really is. And that is such a self-serving, gross statement that we have one solution, that one human has all the answers. So what I've said over time about how I coach is it looks like this. You meet with me and I meet you where you are. Whatever it is that you're caught up on, where you're tripping up, your beliefs, your biases, your cultural traditions, your upbringing, your religious beliefs, whatever it is, wherever you are, I'm going to meet you there and we're going to build a recipe for sobriety for you, just me and you. And it's going to be perfectly tailored to what you need. A friend of mine used that saying the other day in a meeting, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm taking that and running with it. It's like making soup, and we're building a recipe, and the recipe is going to be very specific to your tastes. So yeah, that's unsexy to say when it comes to how do you coach clients. Well, just whatever. I mean, it sounds like I don't know what I'm doing, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. The truth is, I know that what helps people is to meet them where they are, is to customize. Yes, there are a lot of similarities in addiction recovery and a lot of similarities in our stories, but there's also a lot of differences. And we are allowed to have different stories and different traumas and past and preferences and things we bring to the table. Because so much of our personal experience in the way that we see the world and in the way that we internalize things, it lends to the style of coaching and the tools that you need in your toolkit to get sober. Case in point, They do twin studies, twins that were identical, raised in the same home, same parents, and how one becomes addicted and the other does not. And, my sister has identical twins, and they literally share the same DNA. They were raised in the same home, same parents, pretty much the same goings on in life, right? And these two boys couldn't be more different. Like, one just joined the army and the other one is happily content at home, kind of following in his father's footsteps. He has no desire, you know. It's so I've watched human beings long enough to know that even identical twins need a different approach. Because the way her twins have internalized their upbringing, their childhood, the way that they have processed the messages that my sister sent to them, as a parent, it's fascinating how different they've sort of digested that information and, formulated their views of the world. So when I break down really what it is that we're doing in a coaching session, is a lot of it is verbal processing. And when it comes to that, um, I think it's easier to explain it like the client does most of the talking. And through the verbal processing and, with a trusted person who has been there, then we're able to reframe a lot of those cognitive distortions. We dismantle those distortions, and some of which, will trigger a craving. And we're able to, add in compassion and connection with other individuals and creativity, and all of which helps through neuroplasticity to rewire our brain so that we can build new habits. And I strongly believe that people have the capacity to fully recover from alcohol. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to go to the bar and be perfectly fine chugging back a bunch of drinks. Oh, I'm healed. I'm no longer struggling with alcohol. No, it doesn't mean you can drink again. It just means that you can heal and restart and recover and build a beautiful life despite the wreckage that you may have caused in active addiction. In no way do I condone, you're healed, go drink again, or you're healed, why don't you take up heroin? I mean, that's not the messaging, and healing is a journey, right? We always are on this journey. We're never really having arrived. It's a constant journey. But I want to continue with the messaging of hope, and rewiring our brain to sobriety and recovery is such a hopeful message in that we can regulate our emotions. We can build new neural pathways. Oftentimes when we get stuck in a habit, we get stuck in sort of a groove, like a well-worn highway where our car just sort of automatically goes that way. When you're driving down the road and you slip into a groove and it's like your car starts driving itself and it kind of veers off one way. I mean, that's sort of what happens to us in active addiction. Clients will tell me, I don't know why I drank. I told myself I wasn't going to drink again. But we've formed these really strong neural networks around drinking and this habit that we've picked up and all the messaging that we've processed in the world. And, there is hope to rewire that. There's hope to rewire any bad, habit that we get ourselves into. I was looking into podcast names, and there's another podcast called Rewired, and it talks about healing from disordered eating, because essentially a lot of it is the same, neuroscience. And I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not going to get on here and boast that. But I've read enough and know enough that I can talk about this aspect of recovery in a meaningful way. And I hope going forward that I have more experts on the podcast and we have more conversations around this. Because as much as I, have reverence for AA and all the truisms that we say, like it works if you work it and one day at a time, and it's a bit of folklore. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's some bit of folklore. It's not a lot of scientific backing. And it works, right? There's a spiritual component to it. It works for so many people. But when I got sober And, as my mind and brain started to clear as a nurse, I felt compelled to dive into the research and to understand a bit more about neurologically, physiologically, how will I recover? And will I get back parts of myself that were lost? And will I create new? And those are all magical things on the journey that I want to share with other people. And it really encompasses the way that I lead my business is I feel like encouraging people to go to meetings, encouraging people to have self-compassion, and encouraging humor. Like, we laugh our asses off in coaching sessions, I'm going to tell you. And there's a strong component to laughter in the way that we process and store information in the brain. I may have Jessica Landon come back on and talk about the science of humor. She did a TED Talk on that, and she has a lot of good information on that. But it's my coaching philosophy that talking through things can change our lives, especially with someone that we trust that has been there. And, you've heard people say, like, I heard someone say this in a meeting, or I heard this on a podcast, or I came across this quote and it changed everything for me. Because all we really need is one insight, you know, one little flicker, one little flicker of a flame, and so much can be changed for us if we're able to spark that interest and that curiosity in those ways. So that's what I got for you. The name will be changed. My poor podcast editor is on the back end right now, trying to fix everything. We'll change the graphics. But I hope that you follow me on Rewired Sober if you are interested in sobriety content, and that you know that I'm coming from a more honest place as I start over a little bit in this business. And I'm just grateful that so early in the game, I was able to catch myself in this behavior. And I attributed it a lot to the fact that a lot of my friends have more sober time than I do. They have 10, 15, 20 years, 25, 30 years. And we call each other out. And they have no problem telling me when they feel like, ooh, like, is that about you? Or is that about helping people? And I really appreciate that, because if I couldn't be honest here and call myself out, who would I be as a coach, right? I would be a big fat fucking hypocrite. And I don't want to do that. So, okay, well, I'm like squeezing my hands, like wringing my own hands right now because I'm nervous, but you know what? Just like surrendering, just like admitting and telling the truth for the first time, I feel free. So, welcome to Rewired Sober. We're going to kick some ass here. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for tuning in to Rewired Sober. You can find me on my Instagram at Rewired Sober, where there are links to catch up with me and all the things I'm working on in my coaching business, or the link tree to my business directly will be in the show notes. I so appreciate you joining me on this journey, and I welcome any feedback or any topics you want to hear about, things that you're struggling with or interested in. I love you all so very much, and I'm just so enjoying doing this with you.